Morning comes from Matthew chapter 25, 31 through 46. And I entitled this, The Forgotten. In Matthew 25, 31 to 46, we read, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, 'Come, you blessed of my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the fountain of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me.' Then the righteous will answer him, saying, 'Lord, where did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?' And the king will answer and say to them, 'Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it for one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it for me.' Then he will also say to those on the left hand, 'Depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me.' Then they also will answer him, saying, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in a prison, and did not minister to you?' Then he will answer them, saying, 'Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me.' And these will go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life." And also John 15:12 through 13. "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that to lay down his life for his friends." As I thought about this, I think of the many times, and I was inspired by a little short video by a woman who turned away a homeless man from her church because she had paid the most money into the church, and she had a right, she felt, to say, "No, that filth can't be in his church." I want you to think about that, because it goes on today, even as we live and I speak this moment. There are many churches who will turn away somebody of lesser appearance or where they live. But I want you to think about this. I couldn't help thinking of all the people who are homeless, out of a job, wearing secondhand clothes and looking for food, scavenging the dumpsters behind the restaurants for throw-away meals. I couldn't help think about those on crutches and in wheelchairs that have no home. And I think of the suburbs of the big cities where people are in tents. And we frowned on it. And we scorn them. Why? Didn't God create them also? Didn't God give them life? How about the woman who is pregnant and has lost her home because her husband left her? And she gives birth in a tent out in the streets. Or what if a young couple struggling to make ends meet? You see them in the grocery store and they're picking out groceries and they're deciding what to keep and what not to put in the basket. What would you do for them? You know, we're supposed to be believers in Jesus Christ. We're supposed to be what we call Christians. And God said, love one another. Yet are we loving one another if we're not helping those who need help? I'm saddened by this whole idea, and it hurt me to no end to think that there's people out there who call themselves believers in Jesus Christ, and we're supposed to love one another, and they look at a person who's less in appearance and say, you're not welcome here. Who are you kidding? Are you a true Christian if you do that to another person? I think of those people who throw words at other people, even believers in Jesus. And we're supposed to sit there and say something back in a derogatory way to defend our belief. But God says pray for them. He says love them as you love yourself. What if you came to church and there was a handful of homeless people sitting outside your door waiting for you to unlock and let them in because they want to hear the message? What would be your first comments? There are some that would say you're not welcome. You're cluttering up our door. Move away. While others will help them to their feet and open the door and say, come on in. This video I watched was a gentleman with a beard, torn, tattered clothes, and he come into the church, wanted to hear the pastors preach. And the lady told him, you stink, you don't belong here, we can't have you in here. And she was the one that supposedly provided the most money to support the church. Should that make a difference? But the pastor was insistent. And she said no. And the guy sat outside and watched or listened from outside the door. And when the pastor walked out and saw him sitting on the bench, he followed the gentleman to where he was staying. And everyone in that area that he was staying were people that lost home, lost a job. A woman lost a husband and couldn't afford to pay the rent. You see, these are people who are in need. Why? I say, why do people have to treat other people that way? It could be them in a moment's time. Unbeknownst to them, they could be in the same shoes that these people in this back alley were faced with. We don't know when our time will come when we have to face that dark hour. To the people that are listening, these doors to our church are wide open, and everybody who feels a need to hear God's message is very, very welcome. And if somebody has an objection to that, I'm sorry. I will not back away from it. But my job is called to preach to all who will listen to the message. Some of us would just shake our heads at the scene out front the door of the church with all these people sitting there wanting to come in and hear the message. It's unfortunate. The truth about knowing about some of them, they have lost their homes because they have been laid off of a job. Family member ended up in a hospital and they couldn't pay the bills. Military duty personnel come home with no home to be in. Maybe even in a wheelchair. Are we to say no to them? I say yes. Come in. And some of them may even be having health issues and can't afford the medical bill, but they're out there in the street and they may not have very many days left to live. We don't know their condition, but are we supposed to sit there and make fun of them and poke at them like they're lesser of an individual than me as a believer in Jesus Christ? I think of the verse that we read a couple weeks ago about Jesus having compassion for the multitude. Where's your compassion for these people that are less fortunate than you? Why are you so eager to put them down when you don't know them personally? Did you ever talk to any of them? Have you ever thought about going and saying, hey, how can I help you? Or what is going on? Why are you here? How many of you stopped alongside the road and helped somebody with an auto problem? Or did you just drive by and say, I don't trust this? I'm guilty of that sometimes too because I'm not sure of the situation. And we all have that fear. But I ask God for forgiveness on that part. Because if we pray and ask God to help us, help them, what have we got to fear? This is what our reading for today is telling us. Not just in our reading today, also in Scripture elsewhere as well. For instance, in John 13:34-35, a new commandment I give you. Listen to this very carefully. That you love one another as I have loved you. That you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. It doesn't matter what position that person is in. It doesn't matter if he's the richest person in the world. We are to love every one of them, whether we want to or not. It's a commandment from Jesus Christ. Love one another. Romans 12:10. Be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love, in honor giving preference to one another. Is kicking somebody to the curb giving them love? Is telling them they're stink giving them love? Thinking of my chores as a child, we'd have to go into the dairy barn and help Mom with the cows, milking cows or feeding the cows or feeding the hogs for that matter. And it was chores we had to do before we got on the bus. And sometimes we come out of that hog barn smelling like them. And we got told about it. But we went to school anyway. So I know what it does. I know what it feels like. And it's kind of why I'm putting some personal touch into this, because I've been down that road as a kid. But what difference does it make? In the overall picture, I'm still made from God. I am God's child. And every one of you who are listening are children of God. Whether you believe Him or not, that's up to you. But He created each and every one of us. When we refuse to help those who need assistance, whether it is to give them a place to live, put a little gas in their car, or helping them find medical assistance when needed, are we loving them as God has commanded us to do? First John 4:7. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Do you know God enough to sit there and say, let me help you? Is there something I can do for you? I have scratches on the side of my truck from trying to rescue people from a snowstorm. And underneath that snow that was coming down was slicker than ice. And the farther I tried to get closer to them, the more that wind that was behind this storm blew me in against the bleacher out at the park in town. That's where those scrapes come from, where the white paint is on the side of the truck. I still managed to help them get out and get to safety in that storm. See, it doesn't matter, and I'm not saying it to boast. I'm saying if we're Christians, we go and we help where needed. We don't sit there and say, well, how dumb was that they drove out in the snow and got stuck. That's not the point. The point is they're there, they can't get out, and they need help. And it's our responsibility as believers in Jesus Christ to help those who are in trouble. You would expect nothing less from God Himself when you call upon Him, would you? So don't be so eager to crash dive somebody else's life because of where they're at. Jesus says, then the king will say to those on his right hand, come you, blessed of the Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. Remember what Jesus told Peter when Jesus asked Peter 3 times, Peter, do you love me? When Jesus said that the first time, he said to Peter, feed my lambs. The second time, Jesus said to Peter, tend my sheep. And the third time, he said, feed my sheep. What does that mean to you when you think about that? Feed my lambs. Tend to my sheep. And feed my sheep. The lambs are the newborn believers. The sheep is the flock that's already saved, and the sheep is the whole congregation. Feed them. He's leaving nothing out, from the baby to the adult in Jesus Christ, and those who are not saved. We are supposed to feed them with spiritual food so that they can grow for eternity and someday come and accept Jesus Christ as their own Savior. So when you think about that person in the middle of nowhere with no home but a cardboard box in an alley somewhere, and you want to put them down for what they are, back off. Be the Christian you call yourself and do what you can to see what you can do to help that person. And I guarantee you that all of the homeless that everybody's fussing about today would be in a better place if they knew someone could hand them a little hope, whether it's a piece of scripture or a slice of bread. I remember a time when I was having a rough time. I was still in the Navy. I was working 3 jobs and I was having trouble making ends meet because I caused myself to get into so much debt I couldn't afford Christmas for my kids. I didn't expect nothing from anybody. I came to church one day and I was asked, how's things going for your Christmas plans? I said, I don't have any plans. I says, I'll be lucky if I can pay all the bills. I didn't ask for anything from this church. But the pastor asked me. And the next Sunday I went to church and he says, is your car here? Is it unlocked? I says, yeah, why? He said, don't worry. You got the keys? Sure. God blessed me with a loving church. And when I went out to go home, and take my family home, the back of the car was filled with gifts and food. So I've been there. And if it wasn't for that, we'd probably have a pretty rough time. But you see, it only takes God's grace and God's love and people who love Him truthfully and care about you enough that they want to help. My question to my congregation and to the people who are watching this, are you willing to help those in need? But there's a problem if you're not willing to do that. As we read in verse 41, then He will say to those on the left hand, depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Those who did not do these things for the needy then asked the following question, verse 44. Then they said, also, they then answered, also saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister to you? First of all, were you looking? That's my first question to them. Were you actually looking in concern? Or are you just looking elsewhere to bypass them altogether? And they weren't looking to help, to start with. They didn't have a compassionate heart to even think, hey, that person might need some help. And then in verse 45, then He will answer them saying, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it for the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. See, this is all about not only helping them, but it's also our works. If we're not willing to take our faith in Jesus Christ as born-again believers and put it to work helping them who need it, who are we to blame? We will answer one way or the other for how we behave as believers. The bottom line, when we feel that someone is less important than ourselves, we must be willing to ask ourselves, what if this was me in this place? What would you expect if it was you in their place? You were at the bottom as they are. Would you expect help from somebody? Would you be looking for help? Or would your hope be all gone? See, that's another thing. If we're helping them, we're boosting and giving them people some hope that they've lost. And there's many out there, including those who are well-to-do and feel like there's nothing to worry about. But I guarantee you, they're waiting and they're thinking, I don't know where I'm going. There's days when I don't know where I'm going. Even as a believer, we have those doubts. And we can squelch them by calling on Jesus. And I do. But see, they're down at the bottom and they don't know where to go because they can't trust anybody. They don't know who to reach out to because nobody's willing to say, God loves you. Can I help you? So before you condemn another for where they are in life, remember one thing. This could very easily be you. At the blink of an eye. You know, we've had several tornadoes around the area. What if it took your whole home and you survived? What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? Many people in the big cities almost all but give up. And they need somebody to fall back on. They need somebody they can trust to come and talk to them. The one thing I learned about these people, and I have helped several, to be honest with you, and I try to do it discreetly so they don't know me. I think of the one place where we stopped in Wisconsin, and this young lady was having trouble with her car. She had a piece that was rattling and dragging on the road. And God put me with her for a reason because I had a zip tie. I didn't have any wrenches, but I had a zip tie. And I tied it up so she could move on. And she said, how much do I owe you? And I'm sharing this not to boast, but to tell you that this is the things that happen. I said, you don't owe me nothing, just thank God I stopped for you. Just thank God I stopped. She could have been sitting there all day until dark, and she had another 50 miles to drive before she got to where she wanted to go. We don't know when God puts us in front of somebody who needs an uplifting spirit. Some of these folks are lost, empty, broken, and have lost hope. We need to bring them back to the hope they once had. Isn't that what Jesus is telling us throughout the whole New Testament? Lift one another in praise and glory. Loving them as you love yourself, as you love God. Why aren't we living it out as believers? Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, says the Lord. Thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. That's what we're supposed to do. Matthew 25:40. And the king will answer and say to them, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. You're not just helping these people, you're helping God fix these people. Because He told us, go forth into the world baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, making disciples. We can't do that if we're not living up to what we believe in. Let's close in a word of prayer. Gracious Heavenly Father, we just thank you. Thank you for this message. Thank you for showing us what we need to do as believers. I ask that you would bless those who hear this message, that they would be refreshed in understanding of what your will for us as believers is. That we can bring hope to those who have lost hope. Strength where people need strength. And most of all, compassion toward all. In Jesus' name, for his sake. Amen. Turn to hymn 84, please.